It's 1789, and the French have gotten a bit rowdy, and have decided to have a wee bit of a revolution. Depose their king, chop off his head, the whole shebang. This got everyone else in Europe a bit upset with them. France was in a bit of a predicament, and they concluded that there was only one thing that could be done to repair relations. Declare war on everyone. And so, France and the other European powers had a big old smackdown over the next few years. In 1795, the Spanish decided that they had had enough of getting beaten up, and thus signed a peace treaty with them. Now, this might have been all well and good for those two, but there was someone they forgot to ask. Britain. Britain was mildly upset about their allies piecing out on them. So mildly upset that they declared war over it, and despite a brief peace, they became determined to destroy the Spanish Empire once and for all. And this is where our story begins. I'm Redcoat Histories, and these are the British invasions of Rio de la Plata. The British decided that the best strategy they could employ to weaken Spain was to deprive them of their colonies, either through granting them independence, taking over for themselves, or by hiring a wizard to make them all magically disappear. The last one wasn't really an option, so they decided to go with number 2. That number 2, not the other one. Get your head out of the gutter. There were 2 main invasions of Rio de la Plata. We'll talk about the first one, then the second, then we'll finish off with some of their long-term consequences, leading to one of the most schizo-civil wars in history. In 1806, after yoinking the Cape of Good Hope from the Dutch, the British squadron sailed over to Rio de la Plata and dropped off 1,500 men under the command of William Carr Beresford. On June 25th, while the British soldiers were disembarking off the coast of however you pronounce that, the Viceroy was attending his daughter's engagement feast and was having a rather good time until this happened. Sir. Yes, Pablo? I have a bit of bad news for you. Oh, come on, right now? Believe me, sir, it's important. Oh, okay, fine, spit it out, Pablo, but don't waste my time. It's the British, sir. Okay, yep, what about them? They're invading. They're what? They're invading, sir. Viceroy, upon hearing this, immediately abandoned his capital city and whizzed off to his home in Cordoba. In doing so, he became regarded as a bit of a joke, with mocking poems about him being spread everywhere. On June 27th, the British troops arrived in Buenos Aires and took complete control over the city. They raised their own flag over the city's fortress, declared a General Beresford governor, instituted new laws, and enforced the consumption of fish and chips. But I don't want to eat a chippy! Well, you're gonna have to! But I don't want to! Well, you don't have a choice in the matter! Immediately, plots began forming to depose him. Retake the city from without, blow up the fortress Beresford was living in. That one isn't a joke, by the way. You name it. A peasant uprising began in the countryside surrounding Buenos Aires, and they proceeded to engage the British troops in a battle that went something a bit like this.
Let the group get over the screen! Argentine desert! Buzzers!
Más te vale que nos des un pinche cuarto, si no ahorita te tumbo los pinches.
The motley collection of around 1,000 angry farmers was no match for the professional British army, and they were all quickly dispersed. Meanwhile, over in Montevideo, there was some French guy called Liniers. Liniers wasn't a big fan of the British, so he went over to the governor of Montevideo and said something to the effect of, "Bonjour, mon amigo. I give you this baguette, and you give me this grande armée before me, and I go beat up the British for you. How about that, oui? Oui? I guess. Oui, très bien, très bien." Liniers volunteered to go and beat up the British, and was given 1,000 troops by the governor of Montevideo in order to do so. He loaded his troops onto ships, and by night sailed them across the Rio de la Plata, and on towards Buenos Aires. The troops disembarked a few miles from the city, and began marching. As they marched, the ranks were swelled by enthusiastic young men, and the remaining peasants from the previous rebellion. The remaining peasants, not the remains of the peasants. Liniers' army kept on marching, and eventually reached the city of Buenos Aires. And once there, they all sat down and had a big picnic together and politely discussed the legality of just kidding. Brutal street fighting ensued, in which 200 Argentines would die, along with 300 British. However, the tide turned in favour of the Argentines. The British kept getting pushed back until they were ultimately forced to surrender. Beresford and his remaining troops were taken prisoner, and all of their remaining ammunition, equipment, and crumpets were seized. Oi, give me some of those! No! Liniers, by liberating Buenos Aires, gained a whole bunch of power and prestige, as opposed to Viceroy Sobramente, who was now completely disgraced due to his cowardice. It was decided to strip Sobramente of most of his powers and give them to Liniers instead, making him into the de facto Viceroy of Rio de la Plata. Among the general populace, patriotic fervour massively increased, and thousands of young men began forming militias in order to repel any future invasions. And future invasions would come. As I mentioned earlier, there were 2 invasions Britain conducted during the Napoleonic Wars. We just did the first, so let's do the second. Back in Britain, Parliament was crashing out. They had just been humiliated by a bunch of Spanish cowboys and a Frenchman, and they were not having it. So, in 1807, they attempted to avenge themselves and once again tried to seize La Plata. In February, they brought in fresh troops to repeat the invasion, but this time, do it properly. They grabbed their salt shakers, assaulted Montevideo, and took it. Just like that. After taking Montevideo, they decided to go for round 2 against Buenos Aires, and landed 11,000 troops just outside the city. But this time, Sobramente, instead of running away, valiantly charged out of Buenos Aires, saber glistening in the sun. Oh, who am I kidding? He did the exact same thing as he did last time. He took one look at the situation and noped right out of there, earning him further disdain from the public and adding to his reputation as a coward. Liniers took the helm once again, and more or less the exact same thing happened again. Liniers attempted a sortie and sallied out of Buenos Aires with 8,600 men, but was defeated and forced to fall back into the city. The commanding British officer, General Whitelock, then tried demanding the city's inhabitants surrender. However, they responded with a letter saying something to the effect of this: "No, we will not surrender to you or your rotten teeth. You can go and take your fish and chips somewhere else. We do not want your tea either. Clear off. Unkind regards, everyone in this city." Feeling rather insulted, the British opted to assault the city with guns, not salt shakers. They marched into the city, hoping to take it relatively easily. However, there was a problem. The RGs were waiting for them. The mayor of Buenos Aires had gone about organising defences, digging trenches, fortifying buildings, erecting fences, the whole shebang. So, when the British came marching in, they were faced with rather stiff resistance. Street fighting ensued and continued between the 4th and 5th of July. Citizens lined the windows of buildings and poured buckets of boiling water and oil upon the British soldiers, causing many casualties and many more hurt feelings. I say, that was a bit rude, wasn't it? The British were slowly able to advance, but morale was very low. They had already taken over 1,000 casualties, including 70 officers, and were only able to occupy a few districts, and the city centre was still firmly in the hands of the RGs. Eventually, their advance came to a halt, and the fighting ceased in order to regroup. However, the RGs had other plans. Man, I've been fighting all day. Yeah, I really should go and get my wounds dressed here. Hang on, what's that? Yeah, what on earth is that? Oh no! After the British advance had been exhausted, an Argentine counterattack ensued, forcing the Brits back out of many of their hard-fought gains. Whitelock, seeing the writing on the wall, decided to get out before things could become even worse. And so on August 12th, he signed an armistice with Liniers, packed up all his boys, and left Rio de la Plata, never to be seen again. Well, at least not for a while. In the aftermath of the British invasion, there were 2 major developments. For one, Sobramente had officially used his last straw. Everyone in La Plata was fed up with him and his cowardice, and so he was court-martialed, deposed, stripped of his Nintendo Switch,
Give me that!
and replaced by the now extremely popular and prestigious Liniers. And secondly, the Argentine people's attitudes began to shift quite significantly. The average Argentine went from being generally loyal to Spain to now thinking, hey, you know, we expelled that British invasion all on our own. We didn't need the Spanish to help us. Hey, they didn't even send us any troops to help. Yeah, and see that Viceroy? An absolute traitor, that's what he is. Instead of standing with his people to face the British, what did he do? He ran! The coward ran from his capital city and left us to do the dirty work for him. You know what I'm thinking? I think I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking, that you, the person watching this, should subscribe to Redcoat Histories. Yeah, what on earth are you doing being unsubscribed? Look, the guy making this has put in hours upon hours into writing, filming, editing, and researching these videos, and has created a 131-page document for the next few videos alone. Go and subscribe so that this guy can get his channel monetized someday. I'm also thinking that the Spanish are a bunch of cowardly idiots incapable of defending their vast overseas empire, and that we should declare independence from them immediately, followed by raising our own army in order to enforce our territorial sovereignty. Oh, well... okay. The British invasions awakened a fire of national consciousness and patriotism in Argentina. The idea of declaring independence went from being fringe and cringe to being rather mainstream. The movement for independence only grew with time, and was fueled by various factors both back in Europe and locally. For one, there was Napoleon. In 1807, he was looking at a map of his empire until he noticed something. Hey, Pierre, would you come here a minute? Yes, my emperor? See that bit of the map there? Yep, that's Portugal, sir. It's green. Yep. Why is it blue, Pierre? Because you haven't invaded it yet, sir. I haven't invaded it yet? Correct, sir. Well, call up the Grand Armée. I need to fix this. Napoleon invaded Portugal, forcing the royal family to flee to Brazil. Because they were now much closer, had territorial disputes with La Plata, and were allied to the British, fears began of a joint British-Portuguese invasion of Rio de la Plata. Secondly, there was Liniers. Liniers, now officially the viceroy, even though he had expelled the British twice, was still French, and thus could not be trusted. Thirdly, back in Spain, scandal engulfed the throne. The reigning monarch was deposed by a mutiny, and his son was forced to take charge instead. And finally, in 1808, the most important thing of all happened. Napoleon looked at his map again. Hey, Pierre, would you come here again? Yes, my emperor? See that bit of the map there? Yep, that's Spain, sir. It's yellow. Why did you not notice this earlier? Why isn't it blue, Pierre? Do you want to invade it? Yes, I want to invade it! Now go get the Grand Armée! Napoleon waltzed down into Spain, deposed the King of Spain, and installed his brother as the King of Spain, to the delight of basically no one. This resulted in the outbreak of the Peninsular War, and around 17 quadrillion Spanish resistance governments being set up across the country. This left everyone in Spanish America wondering what on earth is going on over there? Who on earth is the real government? Why should we even bother being their subjects when they can't even control their own country? And why aren't you subscribed to Redcoat Histories? I mean, come on! All of this confusion and chaos allowed plans for a revolution to be put into overdrive, and in 1810, the revolutionaries decided to put their plans into action. The May Revolution broke out in May. Shockingly enough, the viceroy was deposed, and a junta was set up in his place, and a new country, the United Provinces of South America, was proclaimed. Spanish troops took control of the north of the country and began a campaign to resist the revolutionaries. Meanwhile, in the south, the governor of Montevideo pulled a "look at me, I'm the captain now." He declared himself viceroy and began setting up an army in order to stamp out the new government in Buenos Aires. The revolutionary government didn't like this very much, and so they called up a guy to put an end to it. The guy they called up would initially serve Buenos Aires to great effect, but his differences of opinion with them would slowly pile up, and disagreements between the two would quickly spiral out of control and boil over into an all-out armed conflict. A conflict which would lay the groundwork for decades of civil war to come. A conflict known as... You're gonna have to click in the next video to get that one.